All right, everybody, greetings and welcome to Conflict Radio. Mark, can you mute that? You're gonna have to mute your that YouTube stream there.
Yeah.
Everybody, greetings and welcome to Conflict Radio. Mark, can you mute that?
There, I got it.
Your,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, you just gotta hit
there.
The
It
mute.
is.
All right, awesome. Hey, everybody, welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is September 22nd, 2021, and on the show today, we're going to be speaking with Mark Fiorentino. Mark is an author and has been obsessed with Einstein's unified field theory ever since hearing about it when he was 10 years old. He worked for many years in the high-tech industry, including for IBM. He has a book out there called Master of Reality, and we're going to talk to him today about the cosmology theory of super relativity. And this is going to be a very interesting show. Let me quick give a shout out, I guess, here to everybody that's in the chat. I see Distorted Reality is here. Can you mute your flip phone? I think we've got that figured out. Distorted. Not Quite Human is here. How you doing? Arlene is in the house. Sapphire Elf is here. Blue Chicken's here. How you doing? Clifton James Kelly. I see you're here. Dr. Strangelove. Will Carr. Let's see. Antonio is here. Sapphire Elf. Scrolling up. Man, you guys have been waiting for this show for a while, just chatting and chatting and chatting. Let's see if anybody's leaving a comment here. All right. So Mark, how you doing today, man? Welcome to Conflict Radio.
Fine, thank you. It's happy to be here.
You know, you have some really interesting I guess ideas and a neat little theory put together, and it's all based on Albert Einstein, right? You got into him as a kid. You were 10 years old. Can you tell us, how does a 10-year-old kid get into Albert Einstein?
Oh, it's a very odd story, really. It starts when I'm going to catechism at the church. I was a Catholic, it still am, and going to catechism, and I remember the nun asking us to go home and find a saint born on our birthday, and then come back the next week and give a little report on the saint that's born on your birthday. So back in 1965, there was no internet. There was no easy way to do a search on dates or names or anything. So I had very little resource available. I had my parents. I asked them. They weren't aware of anybody born on March 14th. So, and I remember very clearly, it's funny how you remember certain things like this so clearly, whereas most of my life I can't remember anything. But I remember this. I remember walking to the calendar in the kitchen and looking at my birth date and seeing the name Albert Einstein. So I says, well, I guess I will give a report on him. So I went over to the Encyclopedia Britannica and started reading about him, and it just resonated with me for some reason. I just thought he was the coolest guy. And then I read about the unified field theory that was located somewhere near Albert Einstein, or there was a reference to it, and I went and looked that up. And when I read that, I thought to myself, this is the best idea I have ever heard of. This makes sense. Everything is connected somehow through some field. And I can't explain why at the age of 10 years old that thrilled me so much, and it just resonated. And from that point on, everything I read, I got into science heavily after that. And everything I read, every TV show I watched, I thought, does this fit into the unified field theory? Is there a clue here? And I started looking for clues to help me understand how electromagnetism could be, basically electromagnetism and gravity emerges aspects of a single fundamental field. So I started a lifelong study of that sentence.
All right, so let's get into unified field theory a little bit. What is that? Can you sum that up for us?
Yeah, basically it's this. Electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. The thing I just said, that's it. Somehow electromagnetism, which is really two forces. It's an electrostatic field and a magnetic field. I deconstructed them to get to my theory, the theory of superrelativity. So somehow the magnetic field and somehow the electrostatic field were different types of bending of the fundamental field, which I've learned later on in my studies that the fundamental field had to be what they called the ether. And it's just another word for space. So electrostatic fields and magnetic fields are two types of deformations or bending of space, with gravity being the third type of deformation. So somehow we had to work out how electromagnetism makes gravity. That was the grand search. That's what I spent most of my life doing. And I was able to make the connection. And I now have a research paper on ResearchGate that has the full answer to that question, the mechanics involved with the mathematics for the physicists, folks. That problem I'm announcing has been solved.
Okay, so can you tell us the answer? What the
Yeah,
what
sure.
Like I guess let's hear it, right?
Sure. Yeah, it's all about mechanics. Einstein was looking for, in the last days, the unified field theory. He wrote several papers on it, and he was working on the problem from a slightly different angle. He was always using geometry, and I also use geometry, but he was looking for a mechanism, the link that somehow electromagnetic particles were interacting with something, which had to be the fundamental field, in order to cause gravity. So through years of studying Einstein, I mean, I get 90-something% of my theory comes from his work, his studies, his ideas, and one of them was the equivalence principle, where he noticed acceleration and gravity are somehow the same thing. And now in my explanation, I'm going to tell you exactly how they are the same thing, how they come about together. So let's go to Einstein's, what's said is to be Einstein's happiest thought. What I'm going to explain to you right now is the mechanism, the mechanical way that this thing that I call gravity is caused by an accelerated motion of fundamental unbalanced charges. When charges move in this way, they cause the space in and around the particle to contract. Gravity is a contraction of a spatial medium. That's the theory of superrelativity explanation. Now, how I got to that was by studying Einstein, and here is his happiest thought in Amir D. Excel's book, God's Equation. He says this: Einstein followed the line of reasoning that began with his happiest thought of his life. Still at the Swiss Patent Office, he conducted one of his famous thought experiments. Einstein imagined a circle spinning in space. The center of the circle did not move, but its circumference was moving quickly in a circular direction. Einstein compared what happens in several reference frames, a standard tool he had used in developing this special relativity theory. Now, concentrate on this next sentence, underline it, highlight it. He concluded using his special relativity that the boundary of the disk contracted as it spun. That's the mechanism that I discovered. I just said, let's not use a disk. Let's just imagine instead of a disk, we had tiny little disks made of quarks inside of the neutron and proton. Supposing they move just the same way as the spinning disk in this paradox, basically, that he's describing. There was a force acting on the circle at the boundary. The centrifugal force in its action was analogous to that of the gravitational force, but the same contraction that affected the outer circle left the diameter unchanged. Thus, Einstein concluded, in a way that surprised even him, the ratio of the circle to the diameter was no longer pi. That means there's some sort of special bending of space, a contraction. He deduced that in the presence of a gravitational force or field, the geometry of space was non-Euclidean, means that it's bending. So that is the mechanism. And I use that mechanism to construct a mathematical model that basically is the same thing. What I just described to you was actually discovered by Max Born and then later Paul Ehrenfest, and it got named the Ehrenfest paradox. So Einstein, when he read this, he realized, wow, this is important. There's a link here. I can get to gravity. I can get to a way that moving electromagnetic fields, small particles, because that's what they are, electromagnetic fields, can generate a gravitational field, which is basically a contraction in a continuous medium, the space, the ether, which is thought of now and then in that time in 1905 as a quasi-elastic solid. It's something, quasi meaning if you bend this thing a little, this space, when you remove the force that's bending it, it snaps back in place. And elastic means it can move in little tiny ways, stretching and contracting. And solid means it's something that is continuous. It's not made up of parts. It's not made up of particles itself. This thing is continuous. And particles that exist in it are consubstantial with it. They are made from it and move within it. They are fields that are moving within that fundamental field. So this is all part of the theory of super relativity. It comes from Einstein's ideas, and then his equivalence principle, this thing that gravity and acceleration are the same thing, now has a deeper meaning. We have an understanding of why acceleration causes gravity. Whenever a particle accelerates in this medium, it causes that medium to contract. The Ehrenfest paradox explains that. So that is the whole explanation to the unified field theory. I found a way to move electromagnetic fields, little tiny particles like the quarks inside of the neutron and the proton, to move in an accelerated manner. And I have a thing called a trefoil knot light that you can't see, but that's how the particles move inside of the neutron and proton. They form a trefoil knot, which binds those particles together. It's a dynamical geometry. And so you want to have this sort of geometry set up. This is what Einstein was looking for. And I was able to find this geometry or discover this through an NDE, a near-death experiencer. And there's a long story to explain how I came up with the idea to search through NDEs to looking for the dynamical geometry. But basically, the short story is that's how I found it. And I call this.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to cut you off just a second because I want to get a question in there about the NDEs.
Okay.
Sure. Do you have you got to turn the volume down on the YouTube thing there. I guess we're getting a little bit of an echo. It's gone now. But you said that the geometry of near-death experiences. Now, is this the same geometry that people would have if they were doing DMT?
DMT? I'm not sure what you mean by DMT.
It's a chemical in the brain that the brain releases upon death that many people attribute to near-death experiences, and you can actually we've talked to brain scientists on the show before that said that you can actually take DMT. I believe that's right, that I'm saying that right, the DMT for near-death experiences, and then you see things like sacred geometry and all kinds of things. It's kind of like a different way of shrooming, I suppose.
Well, yeah, the psilocybin, I think, is what they use, mushroom type stuff. This is a way, perhaps, to get a connection. You break the connection from the body in the material world and get to the spiritual realm where you have more of a total consciousness, and you can see things like the platonic solids, which is what this woman, Claire Dennis, saw. in her near-death experience, along with the trefoil knot and some statements from God saying, basically, I am the energy that forms mass, which fits into the theory of super relativity perfectly. That's exactly how mass is formed, by energetic particles in motion. So, yeah, I don't know that, you can artificially do that. I don't know about the experiments that have been done or whatever, but to get, the key is to connect to the other side, which when we're in the physical form, we're really not well connected. It takes effort, meditation and maybe some drug like you're describing, or, psilocybin or whatever. And maybe on occasion, if it's not a bad trip or whatever, you will have some deeper insight and some connection. I don't recommend going that route. I like the natural method better of, peaceful meditation.
Dying would be the natural method, right?
Well, that is a natural method, but not that one. I mean, meditation and that sort of thing. But dying is definitely the other method.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways. People say you can get into the sacred geometry of things, and it's I guess it's stuff that's been talked about for centuries, right?
Well, yeah, the trefoil pattern is a pattern that's in the Catholic faith. It shows up in some of the olden antiquities in Ireland and places like that. It's very big there, and I'm sure other places have trefoil patterns, and maybe in the Norwegian version of religion, I think there's a trefoil pattern there too. So it's something that keeps sifting into the consciousness of mankind at some level. This is what binds and creates. It's the breath of God. It's how the universe is created and has life. Without this dynamical geometry system that creates mass and holds matter together, and we get other solids from it, and elements and everything through a complex evolution of energy and energy and emotion, that we can get all these other manifestations of our reality. It's a wonderful thing. It's an intelligent design, and that's one of the points I really want to stress, is that none of this is accidental or random.
All right. So it sounds like you believe in a religious aspect of this, and I'm asking, I guess what I'm saying is when you say intelligent design, do you mean that it's created by a god, or do you mean that it's like a simulation of some kind that we're in?
Well, I think you could call it a simulation, especially design simulation of a material world. Yes, it's definitely, I'm a theist, so I believe that God created this universe. And I believe that, and it's been said by other NDE people many times over, they say basically this: all of this three-dimensional world is within God. There is nothing outside of God. Everything within this physical universe has to correspond to laws, and God set those laws, the laws of physics. Everything that we see in this universe, they are immutable as God is immutable. None of this, what we see and experience, is an accident. It is intentioned by God. And I say that in my book. He accomplished the creation of the universe through the power of intention. And we need to get back to that. Religion someday will eventually subsume science. And that's part of my mission. My goal is to help that happen, because that's the truth. This is not a political thing with me or anything of that nature. I'm just about the truth. And when you know the truth, you become wiser and you make better decisions. And
well, science isn't a political thing. It shouldn't ever be political. It's not, you can't say, the Republicans believe in gravity and the Democrats don't believe in gravity. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, science is science, right?
Science, well, science has its own religion. I guess.
Meaning like
And
no religion.
exactly. Their religion is anti-religion. Not all scientists. I've talked to many that are very religious, but most of them, certainly mainstream, are either agnostic or atheists. And this has to be overcome because they will never have the grounding necessary to get to the truth, because they'll always be floating in some following the false doctrines of quantum mechanics into rabbit holes that they'll never be able to dig their way out of. The only way is to know what's really happening, let's know what's really going on, and understand that this is all created for a purpose. This whole universe, in our limited form of the human form, it's physical because it has limitations, and limitations make possible things like suffering and difficulty and challenge, which you can't get on the other side. Everything's perfect there. So this whole simulation, if you want to call it, that's kind of what it's all about. It's a learning, it's a school. It's not just a school, but it's like an amusement park ride. You get on and you're going to go your ups and downs and curves and all this stuff. And then at the end, when you get off, you go back to your home. That's the other side, heaven, if you want to call it that. But science and religion, they're going to have to be merged back together again. It's like Einstein once said, science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind.
All right. So I was reading in your bio that I guess Michelle had sent me that you had an experience with your guardian angel.
Yes, that's true.
Could you tell us about
several over the years? Do you want to know about the one they saved my life?
Yeah, let's start there. Did you have?
Sure.
I guess you said saved your life. Did you have a near-death experience of your own, or?
No, I've never had a near-death experience, but I was near death. But I didn't die.
All right,
and I'll tell you the story. So when I was working at IBM, every day when I'd drive home, there was this intersection I would come to. It was a T intersection, so I could go left, the quiet country roads. It's a little longer, a little slower, but it's peaceful. Or I could go right. It's a little shorter, a lot more traffic, a lot more lights. So kind of sometimes, even though it's shorter, you still wind up getting home later. But on this particular day, I decided to go left. And I'm clearly remember this. I'm thinking to myself, oh, yeah, I'm going to go left today. Take the quiet roads, look at the farm and all the stuff on the way. And then as I'm thinking that, well, somebody must be reading my mind, because then I hear in my left ear, don't go that way. Now, I'm not talking, I hear a little voice in my head. It sounded like to me somebody was right next to my left ear and spoke out loud. So I whip around to see if there's somebody in the car behind, sitting in the back seat. There's nobody there. And I just shook it off because, I'm a technical person at this time, very scientific. I'm aware of spiritual realm, and so I'm open-minded to that. But that was a little too upfront and in my face. It shocked me. And so I shook it off and said, I'm going to go that way. And then I hear the voice again says, don't go that way. And it was a male voice. So I stopped at the intersection and thought about it. What do you think I did?
What?
I went that way. Because I had to prove what I just heard was real. And because it had to be a guardian angel. And normally, you shouldn't go against what the guardian angel tells you to do or not do. It's a really bad idea. Like if you're getting on an elevator and you hear a voice say, don't get on, don't do it.
Yeah, well,
in this case,
it's interesting you mentioned that, because a lot of people say that, I mean, maybe not a lot of people, but people do say that it's possible that we relive our lives over and over and over again until we get it right. And sometimes that gut feeling you have not to go that way, or a voice in your ear saying, don't turn that way, is really your voice from the past, because in the past you had gone that way and it killed you. And so you're living your life again, and you're once again to that point of your life again, and it's your gut feeling. It's somebody telling you don't do that. It's really you telling yourself that, from because you've already made that mistake. What do
Well,
you think of that idea?
that's an interesting theory, but I was able to disprove that it was me talking to me, because then later in my life, those guardian angels came forward in a reading and said, "Why don't you listen to us? You never listened to us." And they were referring to this time. So that was the male guardian angel, who I'm told was the one that's supposed to keep me alive, make sure I don't die in an exit point. And that's what I was heading toward, an exit point, a premature death, a death before you were meant to die. So I went that way. And sure enough, about 3/4 of the way home, I see this truck up ahead, because I'm looking now. I'm alert. I'm saying if the bad thing's going to happen, it's going to be a head-on collision. So look forward, look ahead to see if anything strange is coming. And sure enough, a truck was swerving wildly out of control. And I'm saying, holy cow, he's knocking people off the road. They're going off. He's going back all the way. It's a 2-lane highway. So he's going off the road to the right, then coming back all the way off to the road on the left. And he's doing this over and over again. And he's coming right at me. So I turned the wheel as hard as I could. The person in front of me turned. We went streaming into a ditch on the side of the road. And that guy missed me by inches. And then he spun around and stopped in the middle of the road and was sitting across the road in his pickup truck. So I thought to myself, you fool, why didn't you listen? Do you not realize you could have just been killed? And I went home and I told my wife about what happened. I says, I have to apologize to them. They warned me, and I did. I went against what they did. And I really was ashamed of myself a little bit for not just listening. So that's definitely one story that happened.
All right. So you obviously believe in angels. Now, I was also reading that you believe in UFOs, correct?
Yes.
Do you think that they're UFOs created by us, or do you believe that they're aliens from another planet?
Both. I think
agree with you.
In 1947 or thereabouts, we picked up the first UFO pieces. We reverse engineered it and started building our own. At some point thereafter, we probably captured in some of these other, because the U.S. got really good at finding crashed UFOs, not only in our country, but going into other countries and scooping up the crashes before, especially in third world countries that don't have much of a military. We just swoop in there, pick up all the pieces. If there's any living aliens, we get them. And then the next thing you know, they're in Area 51 helping to build the latest model of UFO. But of course, the many UFOs that we see in the skies, who knows what percentage, but a major percentage, I'm sure, from extra, or from other star systems, maybe even other galaxies and other dimensions. So there's a whole lot of people visiting here. And along with now we see our own, and I have testimony from somebody who wants to remain anonymous. There was 2 people that saw a UFO very close in the desert, in the American desert, many years ago, back in the 70s, I believe, who talked to me and told me they saw a UFO close, and they were in touching distance. It landed, and they were able to walk right up to it and see the markings on it. And the markings said, U.S. Air Force experimental. So I know we have them. We have them. So that's my answer. Both aliens are coming here, and we have our own now, and God only knows what we're doing with those.
Well, let me ask you this. You said you believe in angels, so there has to be the fallen angels, right? Do you think it's possible that it's the fallen angels that are piloting the UFO craft?
I if they're physical, probably not what we call angels, something in between angels and spirit beings, because they're still physical, like the Greys, let's say. Now, I've talked to people who claim to have been abducted, and they tell me certain things about it. And some people claim they're evil, and others say they're not evil. They're actually coming here to help humanity evolve spiritually as well as technologically. So,
trying to help us evolve by kidnapping our citizens and experimenting on their
that's what some people
on their
say.
genetics.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm keeping an open mind to both, because I find cooperation in both their testimonies. They talk about certain things that the Greys do, both the people who are claiming that they're nasty and the ones that are claiming they're good. The Greys seem to be able to do the same things, like walk through doors and windows without opening them, take the people through those places. So they have mastered somehow with some sort of psychic powers to manipulate the atomic scale and allow solid objects to pass through one another. Pretty nifty trick. Both sides seem to be doing this. So maybe there are evil Greys and good Greys. I don't know. I'm keeping the door open, and I'm studying it until I can find enough evidence to go one way or the other on that particular topic. All I know is when I saw UFOs in front of my house, I didn't run outside and start waving and saying, "Take me aboard," because the last thing I really wanted to have happen was to get a needle in my eye or whatever nasty things they seem to do to some people. Yeah, that's a good question.
It's a definitely a strange phenomenon. I mean, there's a lot of people that think the Greys could be some kind of, I guess, a synthetic being of some kind.
Well, they talk about hybrids and how they have a breeding program, and all I know is they're millions of years more advanced. Can you imagine what our technology and our ability, psychically speaking, will be several million years from now? We'll have people walking around that'll be able to levitate objects. We'll be able to do all kinds of incredible things, read minds, remote view. The government's already using psychics for these types of things now. And in thousands of years from now, we're going to be a lot better because we are evolving rapidly.
You speak of an awakening happening. What do you mean by that?
I am hoping to awaken the world to the discovery of the unified field theory and announcing that problem has been solved, and inviting people to go read my paper on that on ResearchGate. And then I also, while working on gravity, because if you want to know how anti-gravity works, you first have to understand gravity. And that's why I put so much effort into it, because I was really after understanding anti-gravity, because that will be the greatest discovery of humanity. Once we have anti-gravity and we're able to not only levitate and float in the air, that's really nifty, but by using the slip wave, which is what I discovered, we can break the light speed barrier by any amount we need to. And that's very important if you're going to go into interstellar space, because you cannot just go at the speed of light. It's way too slow. We have to go thousands, if not millions of times faster than the speed of light to get to stars in a reasonable amount of time. Not years, not months, days and hours. That's what we need to do to be able to get to other star systems, discover life that is abundant in this universe. I mean, it's just overflowing with life. And we're still listening out, in outer space radio telescopes, hoping to hear a fast burst of radio signal when there's millions and millions of planets just in this galaxy alone that already have life at many levels already, and we need to get there. We need to see it for ourselves, and the only way to do that is to build an interstellar starship that can go beyond the speed of light. And that's what I call awakening, getting out there and seeing how much there is out there.
Well, how much is out there, do you think? I mean, it seems like it's galaxy after galaxy after galaxy, and it goes on. It goes on forever, right? There's no end, and it's even growing, isn't it? It's growing every day.
I think we live in a finite but unbounded universe. So this universe, the one we're in, has some limitation, some outer boundary. It's massive. It's at least 14 or so billion light years across, maybe more. But it has an ending. What doesn't end is space. And so that if you go beyond our universe, and there are some near-death people who have described this, there's other universes. And there's quite literally an infinite amount of universes, with more being made all the time. It gets to be mind-boggling. Even with a starship that can go as fast as I'm talking about, it's going to take some time to get to these other universes safely. You have to use a Stargate, something of that nature, which I understand we probably already have.
Yeah, that'd be neat, right? I mean, universes is something. I mean, you're not talking galaxies. You're talking universes, and
yes,
I mean that's just a. So if a universe is surrounded by other universes and they're all growing, I mean, is there a point that one universe is gonna just they're gonna crush the weaker universes?
They're so far apart. It's unbelievable. It's indescribable.
So
the
what's
distance
separating
is so
them?
great. Space. There's an infinite amount of space, or you could call it God. All of this, all of these universes, every atom, every molecule, every element, every being, human being, no matter what shape, size, shape, whatever, is all a part of this, what you would call a simulation of reality. It's all part of God. We are all part of it. And this is constantly being told to us by people who have had near-death experiences. When you get to the other side, we're all connected. And we're really connected here, but because of our physical throttling down of our soul, when we're bound to the flesh, we lose that connection, sort of. It becomes hidden. And but we'll all return to the source, the creator, eventually. And while we're here, we're going to struggle to learn things and struggle to evolve. That's what it's all about. And hopefully we get there, because from what I hear, God is an all-loving being, and he wants us to succeed. He wants us to have good lives. But we have to make the effort. We've got to make it happen. We have free will and choice. That's the key component in this universe. So it's up to us. Ultimately, what's going to happen here? We're making those choices all of the time. And it's time that we start making better choices. And if you have the truth and you have the knowledge, you will make better choices. They all will. We all will make better choices if we have good information, hopefully. But
Yeah,
who knows?
If we're not told which information to view and which not to view, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned,
well, there's that problem.
Yeah, you mentioned slip wave technology just a little bit ago to help break the light speed barrier. What is slip wave? It's obviously this is a term you've created. You've come up with this. Maybe you can explain slip wave a little bit more to us.
Sure. Well, when I was trying to figure out how to create a propulsion system for anti-gravity, and how I discovered that anti-gravity can exist, I had to work on a problem that nobody in physics was willing to work on. And the problem is kinematics. What does kinematics mean? The branch of mechanics concerned with the motion of objects without reference to the forces which cause their motion. If you talk to a physicist and ask them, how does a photon move? You'll get a variety of answers. Some will say it doesn't, and it's a probability wave, and others will say, well, it's moving. We don't worry about that exactly. Or if you don't look at it, it's not moving. You get a lot of confusing answers, and none of them are right. Of course, the particles move. You can look into a cloud chamber, and you see them pushing through the cloud in the cloud chamber. You could see them. They have motion, and their technology that they use and accelerators based on particle motion and crashing particles together. Of course they move. But the key thing is here, they don't know how. So I had to work on the problem of discovering particle motion, which, by the way, Einstein was quietly working on all the way up to the day of his death. There's an article that came at Unified Field Theory of Gravitation and Electricity, written by Einstein on July 25th, 1925. He completed it. And in the last sentence, he says this: nevertheless, I'm still far away from claiming the physical validity of the equations I derived. The reason for this is that I did not succeed in deriving equations of motion for particles yet. He knew it too. He knew that's the key to unlocking the universe. The slip wave is the mechanical explanation for the motion of particles. And so basically, particles are electrostatic fields. So I'm going to give you a short, quick, hopefully, answer about the unification and how it works in this theory, super relativity. First, you start with a charge. An electrostatic charge is a twist of space. So you can imagine that in a solid object of space, the whole space twists around into a vortex. When that happens, you get a gradient along the x-axis of that vortex from the beginning to the end, a gradient field of density and pressure. That pressure wave that forms within the particle is the cause of motion for all particles. You must have a pressure wave. And let me tell you, I examined that when I discovered that. I said, wait a minute, pressure causes the motion. Let's look at that. Let's get some more examples. And everywhere I turned, motion is caused by pressure. Pressure in the hose, in the water inside of a hose causes the water to move. Air pressure in high and low pressure system causes the wind to blow. Air pressure on the top of a wing causes it to have lift. Air pressure on the bottom of the wing pushes it up. Air pressure on a bubble at the bottom of the ocean within the medium of the ocean, not within the bubble, within the medium, pushes the bubble up to the surface. In each and every case, whether it be rockets, jets, or whatever, it's pressure that's causing the motion of things. So I said, well, it must be pressure that causes the motion inside of particles. And sure enough, that's what is happening. Within the vortex of the electrostatic field, which is a twist of space, there's a pressure gradient that forms. This causes the particle to act like a bubble moving through the medium of the space, which is a flat Euclidean geometry, but it literally is pushed through with a direction, a velocity, by this pressure wave, the slip wave field that's within particles, and they move perpetually forever. It's perfect. It's just what's needed to breathe life into this universe. And that's the same system I used to develop the slip wave spatial bias drive, which is going to be used to power our starships in the future. This is the one and only sensible way to move through space, by creating a pressure wave across the x-axis of the spaceship. So you need a simple geometry. A cigar shape is good. A spherical shape is good. And just sure enough, This is what the aliens seem to be using: cigar shapes, triangles, very simple geometries, nothing protruding from the ship. Very bad to do that. You have to be enveloped and completely within the slip wave field to be safe. So that is the method, the mode of operation that can be used to propel starships. And when you do it, it's a magnetic field, by the way, that it's used to create the slip wave. Gradient magnetic field starting at the front of the ship with a very intense magnetic field, let's say a ring, superconducting coil, room temperature superconducting coils that are controlling the current that's going through them, allowing a massive amount of current. And each ring thereafter has got more current and stronger magnetic fields. So you build this immense gradient magnetic field across the dimension of the ship. And it will accelerate enormously fast.
Maybe.
And it does so without, it shields from inertia, so that the inhabitants inside of the ship won't be crushed by the changes in acceleration.
And that might have been what the deflector dish on the Enterprise was for.
I can tell you this, the Enterprise would never work. Not the way it's built. It would be
that's disappointing to hear.
Disappointing. No, what you need is like cigar shapes, spheres,
Oh,
triangles.
we've seen those. We've seen those out there before. Now, let me thank Spartan O Negative for the super chat earlier. I didn't forget. Spartan O Negative does say unstable and not safe. A black hole is safer than using magnetic fields or electric fields. Magnetic fields are very radioactive. Gravity is not radioactive.
I would say that's not a good statement. I would say a black hole is extremely deadly. And in my theory, a black hole is really a super dense neutron star. It's made of neutronium. And so once if you entered beyond the event horizon without using the slip wave spatial bias field, you would be crushed, stretched first, and then crushed into neutronium. This is not safe. You do not want to use contraction or a gravitational field warping to guide yourself through space. You have to use a magnetic field. And I got keyed into the whole magnetic field idea as a kid by reading many UFO books. And I remember reading on several occasions, one in particular, the U.S. Air Force commander went there to a UFO landing site, and he brought with him a magnometer. What's a magnometer? Magnometer is a device that measures magnetic field strength. And he took this magnometer and he went to where the landing site was, and he actually measured the grass. The grass was magnetized. Now, you don't do that with weak magnetic fields. Whatever that spaceship was, it's using high magnetics. And I can tell you story after story after story where high magnetics comes into play. And causing cars to stall, messing with electronics. There's a hum heard on many occasions coming from the UFO. There's the Belgian UFO, which is a triangular-shaped UFO, was photographed in 1980. The person who photographed that UFO used a normal camera that still used film and emulsion and all that sort of stuff. That was analyzed by a physicist. The physicist said there's something unusual with this film. The emulsion itself has been magnetized. Now, this guy got pretty close to the UFO. So there's ample evidence, more overwhelming evidence, that UFOs use high magnetics. So I would have to say that I think they use magnetics, and actually magnetics is shieldable. So when you go into the ship, you're not encountering when you're inside, because you can shield the magnetic field, which is very convenient and necessary, because being exposed to the kind of magnetism I'm talking about is not healthy. I will say that is true. That's why it has to be shielded. But you can't shield the gravitational field or the anti-gravity field. So you get the benefit of the magnetic field strength creating the slip wave spatial field that gives you propulsion, shields you from inertia, and also causes permittivity and permeability of space to drop. And when you do that, you can set the speed limit yourself. And that's what they do in these starships. They don't just go at the speed of light. They go well beyond it.
Do you think that gravity is a primary force of nature?
Yeah, no. Yes and no. In my theory, have determined there is one primary field of force. That is the electrostatic field. Everything comes from that. Once the electrostatic field moves, because of the slip wave, as it moves through space, it's turning, rotating, and what happens is this spin causes space to react around it. And what that reaction is a torsional reaction. So space rotates as the charge moves by. That rotation of space is the magnetic field. The magnetic field, and we know this, thank you, Michael Faraday, and everybody thereafter, proving that the inductive power of the electrostatic field within space that causes the magnetic field. You never have a magnetic field unless there's electrostatic charge moving. That's a known scientific fact. I'm not saying anything new here. All I'm saying is let's pay attention to that. It's important. And so the magnetic field then I would classify as a secondary force, although overall it's a primary force of space in that it's a deformation, a bending of the continuous field. So the electrostatic field is a bending of the continuous field. The magnetic field is a different kind. It's a rotation bending of the magnetic field. And finally, the gravitational field is a secondary field, I call it, even though it's a primary field in the sense that it is bending of the continuous field, the ether. And it's a contraction of space. So the three fields, the three primary fields are electrostatic, magnetic, and gravity. But the two don't happen. They emerge as a result of moving charge. So everything starts with the electrostatic field.
All right. Well, let me ask you this, because we always save the last half hour of the show for listeners' questions. So I'm going to try to get a little bit more in here on the black hole. You mentioned black holes earlier. I guess my question is to you: how do you think that black holes are made? Where do they come from?
That's a big question. Where do they come from? They came from the Big Bang.
Is it a dead star?
Well, that's the current theory. You know, you have a star, and then it goes supernova, explodes, and this explosion causes either a neutron star or a black hole. And I'm saying, no. They were already there. That's what formed the star. So where did the neutron stars come from, which is made of neutronium, and the black holes come? Black holes just a bigger sized neutron star. What's nifty about neutrons is they're a neutral charge, which means you can really pack them close together. You can't do that with protons. It's a positive charge. They repel each other. The repulsive force is magnitudes greater than the attractive force of gravity. You can't have a proton star, really, but you can have a neutron star. And the bigger they get, the denser they get. And eventually they get so dense that the gravitational field creates an event horizon and light can't escape and it turns dark. But it's the same thing. And where did they all come from? They came from the Big Bang. The Big Bang was the cosmic egg, was one humongous sized black hole or neutronium star that had all the matter in the universe in it. And when you get to that point, there's a trigger mechanism that happens. The density becomes so great, the temperature inside the core gets so high that it triggers an explosion that creates the next generation or the next cycle of the universe. So it's a perfect system that's eternal. It keeps cycling back and forth. And so that's where black holes, according to the theory super relativity cosmology model, which is basically 3 chapters near the end of the book that I go into great detail on why everything really comes from neutrons, and the neutron acts differently according to its circumstance. And that smells strongly of an intelligent design, because it behaves just exactly as it needs to behave in order to create life in this universe, new star systems. So that's where black holes come from. So how are stars really formed? Now, currently, physicists believe the gas just magically comes together somehow, and these gas clouds, it just starts to condense, and then suddenly you have a new star. Well, I say no. That gas was gathered by a neutronium sphere, a seed that came from the Big Bang. And when these neutronium rapidly spinning spheres enter into a hydrogen gas cloud, it's spinning so fast, it gathers the gas around the star, and it starts spinning, just like our sun does. And if you look at the atmosphere around the sun is rotating. And if there's a measurement that NASA has done to prove what I'm saying is true, it's called I always forget this word, it's something with tachia in it. And this measurement, tachyline, and this measurement, as you can see, the gases are spinning around the exterior at a slower rate than the inside. But as you penetrate, I guess they're using radar to do this, the gases start to move as one until at some point all the lines converge in the graph, and it looks like there's something solid inside of the sun. But nobody wants to come out and say, hey, there's something solid inside of the sun, because they want to keep saying it's just gas. But it's not. There's something very solid in there, and it makes sense that you need a gravitational force, a strong gravitational force, to gather the gases of hydrogen in order to create a star, because something is holding that atmosphere together, and it's got to be an intensely strong gravitational field.
Well, it's burning something, right? I mean, it's using fuel to burn.
Fusion. What the aliens, I already know about this. They call it the sun source. The neutronium core is the sun source. It's basically driving this whole system using fusion. The pressure becomes so great, it can actually create new elements, like hydrogen will turn into helium when the hydrogen fuses together and forms helium. And you can create all the elements in this kind of system as long as you have, because the gravity intensity is so great near the neutronium that you can create all the elements eventually over time. It's a long process. If you have a lot of hydrogen, it fortunately takes a long time to burn through all the hydrogen and get to the helium. Now, they say when that happens with the sun, it's going to go into a red giant mode. And fortunately, that's probably 4 or 5 billion years off. But what they're not calculating is that maybe 5 or 10% of the sun's mass is going to have to be attributed to neutronium. And so they're miscalculating the number. It's probably going to be 500 million years or more sooner that the sun goes to red giant mode. So it's important to understand this. This is a fundamental principle of super relativity and the cosmology theory. A neutronium and neutrons are like the centerpiece of our existence. Everything happens because of them. The other thing that's very important, that's very strangely important, is if you isolate a neutron by itself within 15 minutes, guess what it turns into?
What?
Hydrogen. Just what you need to build a universe. So if the core of the universe, the Big Bang, was made of neutrons, and then they exploded, and this neutron plasma comes out with all these spheres of neutronium, you have everything you need to build another universe. The neutrons within 15 minutes turns into hydrogen. Now you have massive amounts of hydrogen. The spheres gather the hydrogen and form galaxies and stars. This system makes sense. It's got to be the way it works.
Do you think that all planets have a neutronium core?
I'm afraid that is probably true.
Well, that would mean that we have like a little sun as the core of our planet, right?
That's what some aliens have said. I'm always looking for evidence, corroboration.
What aliens have said that?
I'm trying to think of the person who said that. Somebody I interviewed. I'll put it in the book when I get it again. What was said basically is there's a sun source, and I take that to mean, I think that was from a psychic that I know very well.
Right.
There's a sun source inside of our universe, inside of our planet. And so I says, yeah, I think I know what that is, because when I came up with the idea that the stars are created by neutronium spheres, or seeds as I call them, odds are the planets aren't going to collect hydrogen on their own and form without a seed as well, just a smaller version. So what they do is burn as very, dark stars, they call them. There's another term, brown stars. The planets, when they form approximately at the same time as our sun forms. Because if our sun has a neutronium core, and then this neutronium core had little ones that were attracted to it and have been traveling with it, these little ones form little mini stars, which become planets, because basically what happens on the planets is they capture their own amount of hydrogen and they start building elements: hydrogen, helium, silicon, carbon, nitrogen. Everything is formed right here. And sure enough, on planet Earth, we have every element in the periodic chart. How do you think they got here? They just fell from the sky randomly?
Well, who's to say we have the full chart? I mean, we're just showing a chart of the elements that we know.
The chart that we have now, without any of the super heavier elements that can be made artificially made inside of accelerator, we have them all. Virtually every one, and a ton of water as well. My claim is that we made all the elements right here, and it took hundreds of millions of years to get there, but something inside of the Earth is still really hot. Why hasn't that cooled down all these years? Now, the current theory is there's a radioactivity there, or uranium or whatever, and it's a big atomic pile. But the lava that comes up from underground is not highly radioactive. It's slightly radioactive, not highly radioactive. So assuming that we're doing fusion, which is a much cleaner nuclear process, we should be seeing neutrinos coming from the center of the Earth. So I decided to look for that. And thanks to the power of the internet, I found the Japanese scientists who turned neutrino detector toward the center of the Earth. And sure enough, there's neutrinos coming from the center of the Earth. So there is some sort of nuclear process going on in the center of the Earth.
Yeah.
If you look, the evidence is there. It's just a matter of properly interpreting it.
I mean, science says the Earth has been here for millions of years. I mean, why the core hasn't cooled down by this point is obviously it's burning something. It's using a fuel down there that it's burning. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying it's a fusion process, and it's just, there's an iron core there now, molten, and that's probably slowly being turned into heavier elements. And what is alarming, what I'm a little worried about, I don't want to worry anybody too much, but every time you switch to a heavier element, the burning process is hotter. So we have to worry about that a little bit.
Yeah. All right.
That's all I'll say there.
So let's get into some questions we have from the listeners here. Sapphire Elf wants to know if UFOs use if UFOs manipulate gravity to fly, could they break relativity and also be time travelers?
Repeat that question again. I want to think about it more.
He says, if UFOs manipulate gravity to fly, could they break relativity and also be time travelers?
The relativity that you would be classifying as breaking would be special relativity. What happens is all of the Lorentz transformations in special relativity are modified because you're modifying the space as you break the light speed barrier. What happens is special relativity is extended because we're modifying space in such a way that the transformations don't happen as they would if you were pushing the spaceship with rockets. If you push the spaceship with rockets, the spaceship would increase in mass, it would contract, time would slow down. But since you have the spatial bias drive, the slip wave, none of that happens because you're changing the properties of space, and basically you're changing this equation. Speed of light, this is a Maxwell equation. C equals 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability. The magnetic field causes permittivity and permeability to drop. And when you do that, you have a faster speed of light. Any speed of light that you want, all you got to do is decrease those permittivity and permeability to numbers that are lower than they are now, which they're very small now. But when you do that, you can go faster than the speed of light, and your clock will not slow down. In the actuality, inside of the spaceship, the clock will move slightly faster. And so you get all of the benefits you need in order to break the light speed barrier. So really, special relativity needs to be extended with the new math to accommodate for the changes in the Lorentz transformations. That work still needs to be done.
All right. Guys, if you guys have any questions for Mark, go ahead and put it in caps in the comments section, and we'll get to it at this section of the show. Sapphire Alpha again says, is this unifying field a source code? Could it somehow unlock the meaning of life?
Well, I think that's a good question. And I think what's nice about all of this, it's all coming from the creator. And it's been my philosophy when studying all these years that if you want to know how something works, go to that person who created that something and ask them. And I just was willing to do that. And I did any method I could, research into NDEs, talking with mediums. When I had tough questions like that, that's what I would do. And basically from what I've gathered is that everything is a part of this one singular field, this God consciousness field that is created through the power of intention. So we are all one. We are all a part of this. And if you want to have knowledge or more understanding, be infused with that information, you have to connect back to the source, the creator. And unfortunately for us, that doesn't usually happen until we die. Then any question you have can be answered and will be answered. But our feeble minds, our limited minds, really can't handle this, some of these really super advanced topics and questions like you have, and that the answer is more than we're able to comprehend and work out. We can only use words with approximations of reality and to get a vague idea of what's really going on.
All right. Will Carr wants to know, do you think that this particle accelerator that they are using, CERN, may be the stepping stone to flying through our galaxy and maybe even other universes?
No, I don't. I think it's a distraction. They're their whole livelihood has become trying to figure out, using the mathematics of quantum mechanics in order to predict new particles. And when they do this and they're successful, quantum mechanics math is very good at this kind of job. And they have a successful prediction and they find something. Then they have a champagne party and somebody wins a Nobel Prize and everybody's happy and let's get back to work. But Einstein really didn't like all this distraction, all these other particles that started coming out, most of them after his death, but they're not really relevant to us in our lives and what we do. The stable particles, the ones that are not created in the accelerator, are the ones that we need to be focusing on and what is important, what makes up matter that's stable, not these literally hundreds of other particles that have lifetimes of fractions of a second, like the Higgs particle, not even a trillionth of a second. They never really did see the particle. They were so desperate to find it, they came up with a new way to say they found it, and says, well, if it did exist and it didn't live long enough to get to the detector, then what we would see was the products of its decay. And so they started looking for the products of the decay of a particle they couldn't see. And when they found that, 1 in a million, 1 in a trillion, whatever it was, they declared they found the Higgs particle, even though they never saw it. And so I fear that we're wasting a lot of our best talent and minds and resources on a field that's has no value add in the long run. What we need is anti-gravity. That's the road to the future. That gets us on to other planets. That makes us safe. We could build all kinds of protective devices. We
probably have anti-gravity already, right?
Yeah, I think that the government has, but they're not sharing it. They're not telling anybody, and they want to keep it secret, probably for strategic military reasons. But, at some point, humanity itself, I guess we're going to have to do this on our own. If they're not going to help and they're going to keep this covered up, we're going to have to take the mainstream scientists that are not working for the government and get them to discover anti-gravity and declare it publicly, hopefully without interference.
Do you think anti-gravity is do you think it's magnetism is the answer to anti-gravity?
Well, magnetism is a rotation of space. Now, let me give you an example so you can see this in your mind's eye. Take, if you've ever played with silly putty, that's an elastic. It's almost a solid. They technically call it a liquid, but it's a quasi-elastic. So you take that and you flatten it out, and then you get a comic strip and you press it down, and you get a picture on the silly putty. Now twist it. Look what happens to the material as you twist it. The picture stretches, and that's the key to creating anti-gravity. You have to stretch space. When you stretch it, you pull it apart. That's the anti-gravity field. It's the opposite of the gravity field, which is contraction. So a magnetic field is a rotation of space. It stretches space. And so you get a byproduct from the magnetic field, which is what I call an inverse hyperbolic field. It's a stretching of space. And so that is what is the anti-gravity field. And that's the only way I could think of to make it. That's the only forces we have to deal with, the electrostatic field and the magnetic field. And so if we're going to get an anti-gravity field, we need to use the electron moving in a special way through wire. It moves in a way that's not accelerated. When it's going straight through the wire, it's a very non-accelerated way. And so it primarily generates a magnetic field. And that's just what we need to stretch space apart and create the anti-gravity field. And as far as I can, all the accounts that I keep getting from reading UFO books, magnetism keeps coming up over and over again. And it just can't be a coincidence that these strong magnetic fields, they're seen bending light around the spacecraft using magnetism. a physicist who observed a UFO was using a polarized lenses, and when he looked at it, he saw the light coming off the UFO was highly polarized. You only get that when a light goes through a really strong magnetic field. More and more evidence is piling on, telling us we've just got to put these clues together and realize it's just that simple. All we need to do is use magnetism to create the anti-gravity field.
Yeah, it's interesting. Distorted Reality wants to know, do you think Planet X is coming?
Planet X, the nemesis.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Well, what I've given it some thought, and it's just speculation on my part, that there, where the out between Mars and Jupiter, there's an asteroid belt. Now, there's some astronomers that claim that was once a planet and it blew up. And that means that when that happened, if, as I say, it had a neutronium core, that could have been jettisoned into a very eccentric orbit around, it could be hundreds of millions of years. And so this thing comes through every, let's say, 67 million years or whatever. And when it comes through, it disturbs all the planets' rotations around the sun, and it may go right through the asteroid belt. If it does, then it shoots asteroids and meteors all over the place and creates another, world-ending catastrophic event here on Earth. If we get hit by an asteroid that's just 10 miles wide, it's going to wipe out everything on this planet. So the nemesis could be a very real thing, and it would be hard to detect because if I'm right, it's going to be dark, and it may not show up easily with using photography, how we do wide scan photography, NASA does to make sure there's nothing incoming. But that's depending, the objects are reflecting light from the sun. If it's a neutronium core, let's say, I don't know what size, it might be only a few miles across or whatever, it'll be very dark. And the only way we'll know it's coming is there'll be orbits changing. First Pluto, then Uranus and Neptune and so forth. We'll see sudden.
Well, that's if it was coming from outside, not like if it was coming from up and down, say.
Oh, yeah, if it was totally coming up and down, that we would get little to no warning. Yeah. I'm trying to think of a way to even detect that, but we wouldn't detect it until it got really close to the plane of the ecliptic.
Yeah. All right. Sapphire Elf says, if time dilation is manipulated using gravity and time travel was possible, would that mean in some place past, present, and future exist at the same time?
I believe that's true. I believe, and I'm getting that information as quoted from various people who had NDEs. And they say that really time doesn't exist. Even Einstein said time is a stubbornly persistent illusion. There's a very good chance if time travel is possible, and I hear it is, and I write about that in the last chapter of my book about stargates, then it has to be true that all of time is in parallel. It's all existing at once, and we just happen to live in a particular time segment. And if we want to jump to another time segment, forward or backwards, we have to use a portal to get to that. And you would generate that portal with the Stargate technology. And so I would say, yes, it's probably true that all of time is happening at once in parallel.
What about different dimensions and things? Do you think, like some people say that, there's 100 different dimensions with 100 different Earths and 100 different you and me and 100 different conversations that we're having right now. You know what I mean?
I think there are many more dimensions where the laws of physics are different, but life still can form. It's just formed using a different density and a whole system of physics that allows particles, or in some way or form, probably less dense than ours, where they have abilities in this other dimensions with powers that would seem magical to us or whatever. I don't think there's like an infinite amount of Earths, and where, like some quantum physicists say, every time an electron turns left instead of turning right, a new universe is created. That just doesn't make sense, because where is the electron making a decision affecting creating a whole new universe? We'd have universes exploding just as chaos. I don't see that. I do say that the creator creates universes all the time, and he's been seen doing this by certain NDE people, Claire Dennis being one of them, who unfortunately has been associated with a lot of scientists now, and she's kind of gotten talked out of the whole idea of there being a God, which is unusual for an NDE person. But most all NDE people really believe in a God and a creator, and the creator is hard to imagine, and all these other universes and dimensions is really a hard thing for us to grasp. And sometimes I just stop thinking about it, because I really just gets overwhelming, and
you'll blow your own mind, right?
Well, the thinking becomes circular, and it's dizzying, and this, I just don't feel I have the need to go that far to figure out everything. Figure that out when I get to the other side, I guess.
All right. Not Quite Human wants to know what your view on the hollow Earth and hollow moon is.
I'm being told that there is a hollow portion, and I could see between where the neutronium core is and the plasma, not the plasma, but the molten iron core, there could be a gap there. Will people live there? No, because it's millions, if not trillions of degrees. It's really hot, and let's just say millions of degrees, and nothing's going to live there. That's the place where fusion is happening. So there is probably some sort of a plasma gaseous element, heavier elements that are being fused into even heavier elements, and then they proceed outward to the iron core or whatever, and then merge in there, and eventually become, part of the lava flow of volcanoes and so forth. And so we're getting these new, what do you call them? Cores of gold, and and found in quartz and stuff. So I could see how all this is happening over time on a very large scale, and it's just going to continue because that neutronium core isn't going to go away. And if it's not going to go away, it's going to continue to fuse the elements until it can't fuse anymore. So, and then it has to be of a distance where if it can't fuse anymore, we run out of the fuel, then it may go somewhat dormant. I don't know. That's physics beyond what I can really imagine accurately without being highly speculative.
Yeah.
All I know is that we're at a point where there's something down there. It's generating a lot of heat and pressure, and elements are being created. And odds are, hopefully this thing is stable, at least as long enough for us to get through the sun cycle. And we also have the problem where we're falling toward the great attractor. That's going to happen in about 4.5 billion years. And if the sun turning into a super or a red giant doesn't get us, falling into the event horizon of the great attractor certainly is going to get us. We have to get off this planet before those things happen. Fortunately, we got a lot of time.
Well, we hope to, unless we
hope
can,
so.
it could be days from now, we're back in sticks and stones era. I mean,
Absolutely correct. And a lot of
there's-
people keep predicting that might happen, but
what about the hollow
I don't-
moon?
the hollow moon, I think what moons are very small neutronium cores. They're so small they go dormant because
It
if the
burns
same
itself
thing-
out, right?
yeah, the center part is separated enough from the rest of the crust that it's not able to really cause any more fusion, or very little fusion. But let's face it, we don't see volcanoes on the moon. Maybe they were there once. I don't know. You have to ask somebody as a moon expert. But a lot of these planets and moons are fairly stable, while others have volcanoes on them with activity. You still have activity.
Yeah.
So, I would love to be able to drill down and see the core, but nobody's going to be able to drill through the molten iron. I mean, there's no drill that can stand that. We'll never get anywhere near as close. The only indication we have that there's something big and heavy down there is that the deeper we drill, the stronger the gravitational field. And at some point that should not happen, because the stuff over us should be gravitationally pulling up, whereas the stuff below us, there's less and less as we go deeper and deeper. And so theoretically at the middle, if there was nothing there wasn't a neutronium core, there was nothing, we got to the middle, we would just basically float in the middle, because all the gravity would be from above us, all the crust and all the materials would be pulling toward up, away. But so far, the deeper we drill, the stronger the gravitational field, which indicates possibly there's something incredibly dense at the center of the Earth. And so the deeper we drill, it will never, the gravitational field will never drop off because of the stuff over us. The thing that we're getting close to, the gravitational field is going to increase. And so far, the evidence seems to point to that.
Yeah, that's crazy. You got a few more minutes to spend with us, like 10 more minutes?
Sure.
All
Yeah,
right.
we're having fun. Let's do it.
All right. Sapphire Elf says, if E equals mc square and energy equals matter, could life exist in this field simply to observe matter? When we die, do we go back to the field energy? Is it all a circular system?
Well, the other side is energy, but it's not the kind of energy like we think of here, made of light particles or electrons. We classify energetic particles as particles that don't have mass, that move fast. The faster they move and the less mass they have, the more they're classified as energy. Mass here is very dense compared to the other side. Everything on the other side is in a dimension, a much higher dimension, what they call a higher frequency. But what that energy is, the soul energy, I have no idea. That's something I have not been able to understand or penetrate. All I know, it's different. It's like pure consciousness, and somehow that becomes a thing over there. And let's face it, if my theory is right, and this is an intelligent design, it's that thing made of pure consciousness that created all of this and all the laws of physics and everything. So everything here is really emanating from a pure consciousness, and that's controlling everything, the matrix or whatever you want to call it that we have here. So the source of everything comes from something which is spiritual and not really physical.
All right, Sapphire Elf, he's on fire today. He says the guest mentioned he was fascinated by Einstein as a child earlier in the show. Are there any other sci-fi futurist authors that also influenced your work?
Well, not many sci-fi. I'm trying to think of any sci-fi movies that influenced my work. 2001 made me think about extraterrestrials a lot. I don't know that, and I'll think after this show is over, I'll probably, oh yeah, that one. You know how that goes.
Usually how it works.
But really, most of my influence, the vast majority comes from 5 people. The first was Isaac Newton. Then was Maxwell and Faraday, Lorentz, and Einstein. And most of my stuff really comes from examining how Einstein's thoughts and his thoughts about geometry and space and the ether, which he vacillated on quite a bit during his career for various reasons that I go over in my book. But that's where I got most of my influence. Not much from science fiction, maybe a little bit from Star Trek, because I was interested in the technologies, especially the transporter, which I'm now convinced teleportation devices will not use that method. They use something entirely different.
No, I don't understand how it's going to be able to transport the soul.
Well, that's something that seems to be handled by the creator.
Right? It's technically, the transporter technically kills the original, and this is something in Star Trek that maybe people don't know. It kills the original copy and just produces a new copy.
Right. It disassembles it and reassembles it somewhere else.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't disassemble it and then reassemble it somewhere else. It does it through. I mean, it's not the same pieces, is what I'm saying. It's not like you're taking apart a puzzle and then putting that same puzzle together somewhere else. It's a totally different puzzle.
I never read the specs on the transporter. All I know is they use a buffer. Yeah, they use a buffer system somehow, and all of your molecules and atoms somehow are replicated, or taken apart, because they take you apart, right? You see them just kind of fuzz into nothingness, and that somehow goes into the computer circuitry, all of these configurations, and then is teleported to some surface somewhere, and I assume reassembled. I don't know if it's the same particles or not, but that's an incredibly inefficient way of teleporting somebody.
All right. ML wants to know, has the guest ever heard of Tesla code 369, aka the key to the universe? And if he did, what are your thoughts?
Tesla code
369, aka the key to the universe.
No, I've read a book on Tesla, but I don't remember reading about that.
You think Tesla was, the guy was a genius, really, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah, he was a visionary. He was more than a genius. He was a visionary, and a great one. One of the, without a doubt, the greatest inventor of any time.
Well, there was when Tesla was around, a lot of people don't know of the war between DC and AC.
Right.
And how they went with Edison. They went with Edison's electricity. If they had gone with Tesla's, it would have been much more efficient and freer, right?
Well, actually,
like when they set up the grid and everything. Yeah.
In that war, Edison was pushing DC through wires and lighting up small areas, but that method of projecting electricity was very limited. You couldn't go very far, and AC current through power lines could be transmitted much farther. Actually, Tesla won the battle, but kind of lost the war. I mean, he won, and AC current became the thing that is this country and all the world is based on. It's AC current all over. He won that battle, but he paid a high price battling what's his name, the other guy, Edison.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a brutal, you're right, that's a brutal battle those two fought, but Tesla just took it too far. He kept wanting to make electricity free. He was a very noble man. He wanted to, he had an idea of a utopian society where everybody got free electricity, but Westinghouse and these other people who were selling power says, we can't really make money if you just broadcast power in the atmosphere and people just pull it out of the atmosphere. And he kept trying to build this thing that used the Earth's core, and it was going to broadcast power worldwide. And, that was a noble cause, but it was very impractical, and it never really worked out, and it bankrupted him. And he wound up being penniless and just kind of muttering himself in the park and feeding the pigeons. And sad, but he was a visionary, and he did some great stuff, did some great work.
Well, a lot of his work was stolen
by Marconi.
Yeah.
The radio. He actually won the lawsuit, proving that Marconi used his designs. But he died before the lawsuit was over, so he never actually got to see that he won the case. But Marconi still gets credited for the radio. But Marconi did stuff. What he did was he just did limited broadcasts. While once again, Tesla was going large scale. He wanted to broadcast all the way around the world using this system. And it was just too much. So Marconi, first did it across the English Channel, then across the Atlantic Ocean. He made headlines. He was great at marketing. He got the credit.
All right. Well, I guess we're going to wrap up the show today, everybody. Mark, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Sure. I'm at my website is www.super-relativity.com, super-relativity.com. And you can find on the front page, I got some buttons right at the top there where you could find the book on Amazon. It takes you right to it. You find a Kindle version, or you could buy one from my website, and I sign it and send it to you through the mail. And I got a blog there, and I got some shows there, and a lot of different things that I try to keep updated, and lots of fun information. And you can follow me and my activities, I guess, from that place. I have Facebook as well, and
you have a YouTube. Yeah, YouTube channel. Don't forget.
Definitely subscribe over on my YouTube channel, and you can get the latest videos that I put up there. There's some I'm still debating whether I should put there or not, because the things in them were a little bit unnerving to me. Some of these interviews that I've talked to, these people kind of make me a little bit nervous, some of the things that have happened to them. But
what do you mean happened to them? Happened to who? The people that you interviewed with?
Yeah, having to do with, oh gosh, I don't even want to bring it up.
Talking about things that YouTube won't let you discuss?
Well, no, that's more of the government stuff. This, I don't know, I may put them up there eventually or not. I may edit it out, the scary parts, but it's just, I do interviews eventually, every once in a while, just to try to get information from either psychics or people that have been abducted one way or the other, bad or good, positive or whatever. But, I'm trying to get little pieces of information about their technology, so I can see if I could reverse engineer any of that stuff.
So you're talking to aliens via psychics?
You can.
Have you?
I haven't directly. I talked to just about everybody else, though. Some really interesting people, and that's what's going to be in my next book. And it's going to be, I want to thoroughly document it because I have it on tape, so I can go through the conversations and say exactly what happened, make it very clear, and then I can give my interpretations and what I was thinking along with the things that are being said. Like when somebody says a particular item or something, makes a statement, I say, oh, yeah, I recognize that. I was thinking while I was writing the book that gravity is a contraction, and this person is on the other side, and there's giving a hand signal to the medium. The medium is saying, why is this person closing his hands? He's got his hands wide apart and he's closing them together. Why is he doing that? And I get chills up my spine. I said, he's answering my question. That's the question I had as I wrote this book. What causes, is gravity a contraction of space? He's telling me through this very simple method. If I were in his place, I'd be doing the same thing to the other guy over here. That's the simplest way to bring bring across the point. He's signaling to me that gravity is a contraction of space. And there's things like that have happened that, you need that extra. What was I thinking, while this was happening? What was I thinking as they were saying these things? Get the whole thing in context and explain some of these incredible things that mediums, and I've talked to many through my life, and not about the science stuff up until the very end, really, but I've talked to mediums all, since I was 20 years old, just for fun, going to Casadega and talking, getting our fortune told. Who knew how that was ever going to turn out, how that boomeranged into all this other stuff that's happening now. And it happened over and over again by different psychics giving me the same sort of message over and over. It got a little spooky after a while. But if you want to know how something works, go to the source, the creator of that something, and ask them. I just was not afraid to do that. Not afraid of being made fun of and say, well, that's crazy, that stuff. Well, what if it's right? What if they're true? What if it's reality? It's a part of the bigger reality. So I used everything at my disposal to get to the truth.
Yeah, you got to get out there and ask your questions. That's for sure. All right, man. Well, thanks a whole lot for spending time with us on the show today, man. That was a fascinating conversation. We're going to have to get you scheduled to come back on. When's your second book coming out?
Well, I'm working on it now. I'm into chapter 3. It's going along good. It's actually fun because it wouldn't have been worth writing the second book had I not done the work that's in this first book. This first book is really important to the world. And now I think it's important for me to explain how I got there and how I got all this information.
Yeah, Arlene says, will you come back on for another show where we can talk about tech?
Sure.
So there you go. So I'll get in touch with Michelle, and
sure. Okay.
We'll get you scheduled to come back on again. Maybe next month sometime after. Well, I guess I'm all booked up through the end of Halloween because we got some great Halloween stuff coming up.
That's good because I got a lot of stuff in October going on. I got a little ear operation I got to get taken care of. So
that stinks, man. Best of luck with that. Oh, yeah. And I guess the chat's blowing up. Everybody wants me to ask the question that we ask all of our guests. Do you know who Corn Pop is?
Yeah, he's a really bad dude.
All right, there you go. All right, thank you, Sapphire. He posted the links for the YouTube. Your Mark's YouTube is in the chat. It's also in the description box below, guys. Mark, just hang on for a quick second and let me finish this out. Remember, guys, you can always find us online. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Always hit that notification button. It seems like that YouTube, I guess, is doing something. People aren't getting notified we're going live. So I guess I'll have to send them a letter or something and find out about that, what's going on there. Make sure to check out our store. We got some really neat T-shirts and hoodies and stuff in there. It's getting cold, guys, especially up north. Get those hoodies, get those long sleeve shirts. They're actually pretty cool. And Sapphire Elf says, thanks, Mark. Fantastic guest. Please come back on. So, all right, guys, that's going to do it for us. We will be back tomorrow with Lester Velez. We're going to talk about Opus. So definitely come and join us tomorrow. Same time as always, 7:30 Eastern time. We will be back on. Get over and subscribe to Mark's channel. Until tomorrow, batten down the hatches, guys. And be safe.